So the lecture was made possible because of the generous support from our center's alumni, Teachers College alumni. And they, with their contribution, were able to establish Moon Tsang Endowed Fund. And a part of this endowed fund is this annual lecture. And we all agree that this year we can have the first lecture, the inauguration of the lecture by Professor Min, because if you look at these two very special photos, the one direction, the one on the right taken here at Teachers College at Professor Henry Levin's office, that's with Professor Min and Professor Tsang. I think that was at least 20 years ago, right? 20 years ago. And the photo on the left is even further, dated back when they were still doctoral students at Stanford University. So with another mentor, Professor Mingyuan. This is at Beijing Normal University. This is another example, like we always connect. Either things happen here or happen over there. With both photos, you can see Professor Min was in it. So that says a lot about his connection, personal connection, professional connection, spanning over 4 decades. So it's tremendously great honor for us to always get support from Professor Min, and of course from Professor Gu to our center. So I think no one would be better candidate than Professor Min to deliver the inaugural Tsang Gu annual lecture. Let's welcome Professor Min.
Thank you, Hannah. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, everybody. It's a great honor and a pleasure for me to be invited to present at this U.S.-China Education Forum on the 25 years of bridging educational cooperation across the Pacific for the celebration of the 25th anniversary of the Center on Chinese Education at the Teachers College of Columbia University, and the inauguration of Professor Moon Tsang and Professor Gu Mingyuan's lecture. The Center on Chinese Education started by Professor Moon Tsang in the year 2000, has been actively promoting the mutual understanding, friendship, and collaborations between educators, scholars, and students in China and America through joint educational research, training, and very frequent academic exchanges. Actually, after the center was established 20 years ago, I spent a year here to work with Professor Moon Tsang on the center. Professor Moon Tsang was my closest colleague and the best friends in my life, and our friendship traces back more than 40 years ago at Stanford University. Then both of us studied economics of education under the guidance and advice of Professor Henry Levin. and both of us stay in the same dormitory building, and we explore academic issues and frontiers together almost every day, and we jogging together around the campus of Stanford. So it's really that we should do to do this and to better memorize Professor Moon Tsang. The center started by Moon Tsang is not only strengthen the links of education sectors of our two countries, it's also promote mutual understanding and friendship between the Chinese people and the American people in general. I have been personally engaged and benefited from many of the activities initiated and directed by the center. Given the current situation of U.S.-China relations, I think the best way to celebrate the 25 years anniversary of the center is to carry forward the value and the spirit of the center and to continue and enlarge the scope of its activities in educational exchange and cooperation to further promote mutual understanding and the friendship of teachers, scholars, and students, as well as our two peoples in our two countries in general across the Pacific for better relationship and for harmony and the common prosperity of China and the United States. As we all know, in the late 1970s, the far-sighted leaders of our two countries established an official diplomatic relationship based on our mutual understanding, mutual trust, and common interests. In retrospect of the past for more than 40 years, although sometimes there are problems and obstacles on our way, the people of our two countries have continued to deepen our mutual understanding, promote friendship, and enlarge our cooperation in many fields. And both sides have benefited from the rational and healthy relationship. However, in recent years, as we all know, that the relations of our two countries have been running into some kind of problems. Thus, I think peoples, especially educators and intellectuals of both China and America, should work together to explore the best way to handle the current difficult situations, identify the potentials for more common, mutually benefited interests and better collaborations. I think this is one of the purpose Professor Moon Tsang to started the center. And the center inauguration of Professor Moon Tsang and Mingyuan's lecture for better bridging education cooperation for the relationship of our two countries. Needless to say, the China-US relationship is one of the most important bilateral relationship in the world. From the global perspective, the US is the largest developed economy, while China is the largest developing economy in the world. Both countries have important responsibilities for the peace, stability, prosperity, and as well as our future development of the Asia-Pacific region, and also for the rest part of the world. Only when our two countries work more cooperatively, the world can be more stable and safer. From a cultural perspective, both our two countries have very different historical background and a cultural heritage. So we can enrich each other's culture through educational and humanistic communications and exchanges. By doing so, more frequently, people in China and in America can better understand and better appreciate each other's history, culture, philosophy about the world, and the intention for the future and the way of behaving, so that we could better get along and promote harmony, our two largest economies and our two great civilizations. Bridging education cooperation across the Pacific could also help us to solve problems in other sectors, such as the trade issue in the economic sector, which we could not avoid at present time. Simply, we cannot avoid the issue right now. In recent years, as we all know, that the relations of our two countries have been running into some kind of problems. Thus, I think peoples, especially educators and intellectuals of both China and America, should work together to explore the best way to handle the current difficult situations, identify the potentials for more common, mutually benefited interests and better collaborations. I think this is one of the purpose Professor Moon Tsang to started the center. And the center's inauguration of Professor Moon Tsang and Gu Mingyuan's lecture for better bridging education cooperation for the relationship of our two countries. Needless to say, the China-US relationship is one of the most important bilateral relationship in the world. From the global perspective, the U.S. is the largest developed economy, while China is the largest developing economy in the world. Both countries have important responsibilities for the peace, stability, prosperity, and as well as our future development of the Asia-Pacific region, and also for the rest part of the world. Only when our two countries work more cooperatively, the world can be more stable and safer. From a cultural perspective, both our two countries have very different historical background and cultural heritage. So we can enrich each other's culture through educational and humanistic communications and exchanges. By doing so, more frequently, people in China and in America can better understand and better appreciate each other's history, culture, philosophy about the world, and the intention for the future and the way of behaving, so that we could better get along and promote harmony, our two largest economies and our two great civilizations. Bridging education cooperation across the Pacific could also help us to solve problems in other sectors, such as the trade issue in the economic sector, which we could not avoid at present time. Simply, we cannot avoid the issue right now. The U.S. is the largest economy in the world, while China is the second largest economy. In many aspects, the economies of our two countries are complementary to each other. Only when we work together more cooperatively, the economies of both countries can be better off. According to the U.S. Department of Commerce, in the year 2024, last year, China, as the United States' third largest commodity trading partner, the second largest source of U.S. goods commodity imports, and the third largest U.S. commodity export market. China is one of the major markets for the U.S. aircraft, autos, integrated circuit, soybeans, cotton, and many other products. In 2024, last year, U.S.-China commodity trade totals $583 billion, and the service trade totals about $77 billion US. For the combined commodity and the service trade together, roughly more than $66 billion US. This shows the close economic relation of our two countries. As of the year end of 2024, the U.S. direct investment in China is $123 billion, and China's directed investment in the United States as $34 billion. Altogether, about $157 billion of mutually direct investment. In addition, sales in China, majority U.S.-owned affiliates were more than $475 billion in the year 2023. The economic and trade cooperation of our two countries has brought tangible benefit for both economies and for both peoples in China and America. Of course, there exists some trade frictions between our two countries, which is one of the problems that we are facing now. In 2024, the commodity trade deficit between our two countries, according to the U.S. statistics, was $295 billion, and according to China's customs statistics, China recorded a commodity trade surplus with the U.S. It's about $360 billion, at the discrepancy of roughly $65 billion, reflecting different statistical method. In service trade, China ran a large deficit of $33 billion. That is, U.S. has a big surplus in the service trade. This is no need to go into the technical detail to the different ways of calculation. I would like just to say the trade usually is mutually beneficial, win-win business. One country needs to buy while another country would like to sell. No country can force another country to buy anything. Impose tariffs is not the way to solve the problem. If you really understand how the deficit occurs, in fact, the overall commodity and the service trade deficit widened by $133 billion in 2024 versus 2023. And the bilateral U.S. commodity deficit with China rose from $279 billion in 2023 to $295 billion in 2024, in last year. Trade frictions will lead to loss as both sides. Of course, there are also many other kinds of problems between our two countries, in addition to the economic issues, which I will not go into the detail. Many of these problems are the result of misunderstanding and misjudgment of each other's intention, just like what happens among many other countries in the world. Thus, bridging education cooperation across the Pacific to promoting mutual understanding, the better judgment of each other, promoting harmony of different civilizations and different cultures around the world become extremely important. This is the very meaning that Professor Moon Tsang started the center. It has been long argued that when mankind run into serious challenges, conflicts, and difficult situations, education is always the most cherished and the best way to tackle the problems by promoting mutual understanding, mutual respect, pursuing justice, equity, and finding solutions. I think this is the very value and the belief of the Center on Chinese Education at the TC of Columbia University. This is the very meaning and the significance of the inauguration of Moon Tsang and Gu Mingyuan's lecture. I share this point with Professor Moon Tsang and Professor Gu that education could play an important role for long-term, constructive, mutually beneficial relationship between China and America. Back to more than 40 years ago, before the economic reform and the opening up of China, Chinese people know very little about the world outside China, even less about America and the American people, because we were separate by the Pacific. So bridging is very important. Bridging on the Pacific is very important. It was the education sector took the lead in China's opening up. To a large extent, it is through education, especially more and more frequent educational exchange and cooperation, which have made our two peoples to better know and better appreciate each other. In the past more than 45 years, more than 8 million Chinese young people went to study abroad, among which more than 1/3, almost half, went to study in America. And about 60% of these students have finished their academic studies in America and returned to China, like I myself. And these returned students have played a pioneering and a leading role for the development of friendship and cooperation between our two countries. For example, partially due to these young people's effort, there are more than 200 sister partnerships at different levels of our two countries, such as province to state, county to county, city to city. Sister relationships have been established between our two countries, plus thousands of university to university, school to school partnerships, laying a vast and solid foundation for the friendship and the cooperation between our two countries and the two peoples. bridging education cooperation across the Pacific between our two countries, as well as with other countries, have also played an important role of China's deepening reform and further opening up due to a much wider international perspective, which has accelerated China's transition to a market economy with Chinese characteristics. It's also helped China to better integrate it into the international community and contributed to the world economy. Historically, the U.S. was the very first country that China officially sent students for study abroad in 1872. More than 150 years ago, Chinese state officially sent students to study abroad. The first country is America, which was the very beginning of the tide of Chinese young people to study abroad. Columbia University has played a leading role for educational exchange and cooperation with China. It is not only one of the major American leading universities to receive Chinese students more than 100 years ago, and more importantly, Columbia University has a more longer tradition of academic linkage and cooperation with China. Many leading educators in both countries made the contribution and enriched this tradition, such as Zhang Dewey and Paul Monroe and Guo Bingwen, Professor Guo Bingwen, who is the very first person receive a doctoral degree from TC Columbia University and became a very important leading educator in China in the early 20th century. Tao Xingzhi, Hu Shi, Jiang Menglin, these two people served as president of Peking University for many years. And they are graduated from TC under the advice of Zhang Dewey. Also, Chen Heqin, Zhang Polin, many famous educators in China and America contributed to this tradition. Zhang Dewey actually is the very first person receive an honorary doctoral degree from Peking University in the whole history of Peking University. Dewey was the very first person who got the honorary doctoral degree, and he visited PKU in the spring of 1919 and have a lecture tour in China for 2 years until July 1921, covering 11 provinces and many important cities, including Beijing, Shanghai, Tianjin, and giving more than 100 lectures and have a strong impact on Chinese education and for Chinese education development. Monroe was the honorary director of Chinese educational amelioration agency, which established in 1921, aimed at to help China improve education. He also served as the vice chairman of the board of directors for China's Education and Cultural Foundation for many, many years, making a nationwide influence on China education until today. So America is still, because of these famous people, and especially those famous people from Columbia University, America now still one of the top destinations for Chinese young people to further their education based on this bridge work. At present, there are about more than 300,000 Chinese students study in America in degree programs, accounting for a very large proportion of the total foreign students in the United States. There are also more than 500,000 international students in China, including thousands of American students studying in Chinese universities, like many students from leading American universities. They study at the Peking University, Harvard Yanjing Institute Academy. Along with the development, in addition to study abroad program, there are also many other forms of educational exchanges, cooperation between our two countries, such as exchanges of faculty members, joint teaching, joint training, joint degree program, joint research, joint library service, joint international workshops and conferences, and even more frequent educational academic communications through the utilization of internet, which have made both of our education system more internationalized and promote at the center program of bridging education cooperation across the Pacific. We should appreciate and the center's effort. I strongly believe that no matter what happens in the economic sector and other sectors, bridging educational cooperation across the Pacific should be enhanced and enlarged between our two countries. As Professor Moon Tsang has always advocated, I'm always optimistic for the long-term relationship of our two countries. I do not think that China-US relationship is a zero-sum game. Instead, there will definitely be a win-win relationship through dialogue, negotiation, and cooperation. I totally agree with the former US President George Herbert Walker Bush, the old Bush, he deemed that U.S. and China has historical roots for deep friendship. I personally met him twice, once in his office and again in the great hall of people during a Beijing forum where he gave the keynote speech. I strongly believe no matter how many winds and rains on our way forward, after all, our two countries will eventually go for friendship and cooperation, because this friendship and cooperation will serve our common fundamental interests and benefit our two peoples significantly, as Professor Moon Tsang and Professor Gu Mingyuan, as well as the Center at TC Columbia, has been working for so many years and working for so hard. Thank you all. Thank you.